Hello, welcome to Black Comics Universe, presented by Peep Game Comics, exclusively here on The Experience. Please help us out by hitting share and giving us a like and follow. Then make sure to tune in for our original programming 7 days a week on all DSPs. That includes Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and stay tuned tonight afterwards for Jen's Minute to Skim It. All right. Thank you for joining the Black Comics Universe. I have a guest tonight, but before I bring him on, I just want to get you all hip to the topic we're talking about, Black comic keys. And to give you an example of what I consider to be Black comic book keys, or what we consider to be Black comic keys in the community of Black comic book collectors, I just wanted to share a couple books with you guys. The first book is something that actually my guest, Richard Wright of Black Comic Lords, hit me to this past week, a week or so, and that is Marvel Team Up number 100. Now, by the cover, you'll just notice that this is the first appearance of the character Karma, who happens to be, I believe, the first gay superhero or gay villain in a comic book, in Marvel for that matter. But that's not the only reason why this is a key. It just so happens that there's another story in this, I believe by John Byrne, where they introduce the first meeting of Storm and the Black Panther. And I believe this story is a precursor to Eric Jerome Dickey's book of Storm, which highlights the adventures that T'Challa and Aurora go on across Africa, things of that nature. So this is a perfect example of a Black comic key, where on the surface it may not seem like a important key or important book to some, but to our community, this is a very, very, very crucial book. And it's like, I've been a part of Richard's group, the Black Comic Lords, and every time somebody suggests a book like this, everybody's on the hunt. And this is one of the books that we've all been on the hunt for, and I was excited to get my copy. And it's very inexpensive because since it's not, a super hot key, which tends to happen when without a lot of our Black comic keys, is a very reasonable book to find. So if you're a comic book collector that focuses on Black comics, or what we call Black comic keys, this is a very extremely affordable book, less than around $10, if not less. I got my copy for, I think, $8. And it should be very easy to find, if not in your local comic book shop in a long box somewhere. You should be able to find it on eBay and things of that nature. Or check out some of the sellers here on The Experience. They may even have a copy. The next book I'd like to highlight is, I believe it's Batman Annual number 8. This came out in 1982, 83, I believe. And what happens to be important about this is the artist on this particular book was Trevor Von Eden, who is known as the first African-American illustrator to work for DC Comics. And he had a career that spanned over 25 years. Of course, he was also known as the co-creator or one of the collaborators on the creation of Black Lightning that was created in the 70s. But it just so happens that he states that this particular book is the most important book in all of his 25 years. And if you ever find this book, you ever see this book in person in the wild, which you can, this is another very valuable book to our community, but a very affordable book. Again, this is under around $10. I was able to find this book too. Because it was such a valuable book to him, important to him, it seemed like it was, at least for me, it seemed like a very important book to me as a collector. So I just wanted to share these couple of books, and I wanted to bring my guests on, Richard Wright of Black Comic Lords. What's up, fam?
Hey, brother, how you doing, man?
Oh, good, man. I'm glad you can make it. I'm excited for this conversation. I'm excited. I know we can get deep. I'm gonna try to stay focused. For sure, man.
Yes, sir.
But can you share with us basically what Black Comic Lords the group is all about?
Okay, Black Comic Lords is a collective of collectors who have gathered around the importance of Black comic books, Black characters, Black creators, and our mission is to, enlighten, educate, mine, search and rescue, if you will, of these books that are in the wild, and just bring them to the forefront, for Black collectors in general. Most of us, if not all of us, started out, collecting comics. But, there comes a point when you decide or you want to see comics that reflect, you. And that's not always easy to, find. Books are not easily to find. But, fortunately, a lot of these books are in long box comic shops. They're not exactly on a priority list for a lot of collectors. But research through and through trial and error, to be honest, quite a few books. So that's pretty much the mission. One thing about us is we are, like I said, a collective who, just get on the purpose of promoting Black superheroes and Black comic books and Black comic content in general.
What I find interesting is that this particular group, it definitely distinguishes itself from other, say, Black pop culture groups like blurred, quote unquote, blurred groups, because I can say we now because I feel like I'm a part of this community. It's like, we definitely focus on the comic book collecting, comic books as the main medium compared to, focusing on television shows or movies and things like that, castings and all that kind of stuff. Like the vast majority of the conversations I've seen in the group are definitely surround, comics specifically, the content in the books, the valuable critique of work. And so what I enjoy most about the group is definitely the focus on the craft itself, rather than just what's hot or popular at the time.
Yeah, that was actually the of our creator Herschel Lewis. He wanted to, he was like all of us were in blurred spaces, but he wanted to craft a space that was specifically geared to comics, because the thing about blurred culture is that it's very expansive, or it's very it's wide range, and so We try to focus strictly on comic book content. We will talk, movies and cartoons and other stuff or whatever. But we try to nail our focus to the comics because we recognize that, number one, comics are probably our long-standing, if that makes any sense, our longest history as far as blerdom is in comics. Or comic strips and that kind of thing. So just being able to maintain, our part of our mission is also to cultivate readership and new collectors around these books and around this content. So we just try to stay there. It's a very distinct niche, but it's one that is very, very rewarding and pretty amazing when you really dig in it. So yeah, we enjoy it absolutely.
Oh, I'm addicted, man, because you guys have me going back and forth to the comic book shop on the daily. I promise you, it's like there's no real new comic book day or Wednesday comic shopping for me. I'm like, as soon as I can get there, depending on what you guys post, sometimes it's gotten crazy, man. Like I remember I think it was one of the guys, Paco, on the group shared that Marvel book, that Marvel team up book. Less than 18 hours, bro. I was in the shop, bro, Betty, and I was so excited to find it. But now it's like, but I think that's what I think that's what collecting is all about. Especially I think it's important to have a community. If you are going to be a collector, it's like it doesn't feel like it's something that that's all that fun if you're doing it in a vacuum by yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the other thing too. Social media has helped us bring together this collective, this tribe, if you would. I've been collecting I would say 77, 76. And, the one thing that all of us a lot of times have we have been that soldier of one. We haven't had a lot of friends that collected comics. We were always, one or two guys at a school or whatever that would read comics. But we didn't have shops back in those days. We had to go, we got our comics off the spinner rack at corner stores and whatnot. And, for my brothers out east, bodegas and things of that nature. So, we have fun with it. The hunt is the most thrilling part of this, being able to find a story or find a comic that is like, okay, I got to go check this out, and because a lot of times we just don't know, we ask for representation. We want to see more characters, but if you dig, you'll find yourself there. We have to do the work and dig, So part of our job is to inform and then let people know, hey, look, this is a dope story out here. Whether you're talking about, I know you talked in the intro, you talked about that Marvel and that Fantastic Four book. I wanted to just make a correction on that. Actually, that was me and Paul did a show. But that's actually Paul's, that's actually Paul's discovery. And, it's funny too, because I have a couple copies of that and I found that book for $1 just recently. Right. In a long box. And so that's the cool part about this, being able to find, that kind of gold in a long box. No one cares about it. No one's thinking that this is an important book or whatever, but if you're not connected to the story of Storm and T'Challa, then you would pass it up for sure.
Right, and if you're not connected to a community that's sort of like where that story specifically is important to them, you wouldn't know either. It's been very interesting for me because I just started collecting in earnest like this past year. Like I've been a comic book fan, practically my whole life. Okay. Like started in the 90s and stuff like that, reading comics. But as far as collecting, actually, collecting comics and actually paying attention to what I'm doing, it's been about a year, and what I find interesting is something you talked about, and I want to touch on it a little bit
Right.
because um in in one of your lives that you did in the group, you were talking about just some of these black characters and how we treat them, um and I want to talk on that because, like, for instance, like you said something very interesting. I want you to expound on this. Like, sometimes we approach some of these characters with shame, and specifically, it was a lot of the characters that came out of the 70s, right? Because you guys share a list in the group of the vast majority of the black comic book characters that we know of came out of the 70s, and it's
Right.
interesting for me. It's, when I was introduced to comics, it was me. I was in the 90s. And what was interesting about those
Right.
characters is that they didn't necessarily had, I don't think hardly any of them, maybe with the exception of Black Panther, but I'm not even sure, if it wasn't for Christopher Priest, Black Panther will be on that list too, of those characters that basically I wasn't necessarily fond of, and I wasn't necessarily attached to,
Right.
and would agree, I was avoiding those characters. I wasn't trying to buy, books featuring those characters and anything like that. We're talking about Luke Cage, Black Lightning, Black Goliath, even uh, all those characters that came out of the 70s. And I think in doing so, I
Right.
missed out on some certain things, aspects, such as learning about somebody like Trevor Von Eden that I mentioned earlier, or Billy Graham, who drew for Black Panther 2. It's like I didn't know about these artists, and
Right.
so I wanted you to possibly speak on that
Man,
idea.
it's one of those things. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I just wanted you to speak on that, and about those characters that that came out of the 70s and about that era for
Oh, okay.
in terms of Black comics too.
Right. Okay. Well, to be perfectly honest with you, you could talk about the characters in the 70s. You can go back further than that. There are comics like the Jungle Comics, where it's like comics #1, I think, is the first appearance of a character named Waku. And some of the characters that, the images that were created were not the most flattering. And the question becomes, well, what was the purpose of them creating these characters the way that they did? Some of it was the times. There's the guy Eisner who has an award named after him. Was guilty of drawing stereotypical characters or whatever. And to his point, it was like, well, that was just the comics have been around since 1900s, and so a lot of the stuff that they wrote or they drew put us in a very negative light. One of the things that one of the propaganda weapons that white supremacy uses is ink and paper, and so images are very, very important. And so when you go back to that far and you look at what they passed off as our representation, very, very degrading, or whatever it was, an image less. Back in 1942, I want to all Negro comic was created, and it was created by some black creatives, and it stands as the Grail of Grails as far as black books goes. And there is a guy in our community that has that book, and it's a very, very cherished book. However, it's not revered, on a commercial level. But was a book dated, and it was a book with the intention of giving positive black representation, which it was. Only one issue of that book, and it's because the powers that be would not sell the creative paper. Stop that movement cold. You can go a little bit further and you think about Lobo. It only lasted 2 issues, and the thought was, we're not, white people, we're not buying this. One, it was a black cowboy on the cover. 2, it was a positive image, and they did not want to promote it. And so you fast forward to like the 70s, and you get characters like Luke Cage, and you get characters like Black Lightning and others, and you see this image. In the 70s was the era of black exploitation. So you had when you had your movies like Superfly, you had your movies like Uptown Saturday Night. You had all kind of quote unquote stereotypical jive type movies, and this was just the times. And so when you look at a character, say like Luke Cage, for example, the shame or the disdain for it, comes out of our perception of who we are and our struggle. Right. I think sometimes what happens to us, we don't want to look at. It's kind of like, if I can draw an analogy, it's like slavery. Some of us we don't like to watch, or we don't like to see slave movies. Right. And it's because it reminds us of a period in the time where, we weren't, in a very good light, but yet it's a part of our history. It's a part of the timeline. So whether you like it or not, it's a part of the timeline. So the question becomes, should we forget about that part of the timeline and whitewash it, or just erase it? Or should we embrace it, own it, and then make it our own? And I think that's what we've done. We've decided to make it our own. Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning, was a school teacher, but he had a wig for a mask that had a wig attached to it. Not a very good, flattering image, nonetheless. But it was an image for me is in '77, as a 9-year-old boy, that caught my eye, and that became my guy. Because of Isabella's writing. I became a Black Lightning fan because of Trevor Von Eden's art. I began to appreciate Isabella and help it, but it was Trevor Von Eden's art. And I'm not the biggest Trevor Von Eden fan, but I have to give credit where credit is due. And this was a 16-year-old black who was trying to break into the industry, and this happened to be a character that he helped create. And so, these images or whatever, this is nothing new. There have been guys who collect the milestone stuff. Icon and Rocket, or the comic book Icon, dealt with a teenage woman, Raquel, who is Rocket, aka Rocket, who was a teenage mother, got pregnant. Some guys looked at that as being shameful, or that it was a ghetto comic. Then what is this, And that just goes to show you, though, that nothing's new under the sun, and that even in those images, everybody finds something disturbing or challenging, for them. I think that you become empowered when you own what's before you. It's kind of like if I could draw another analogy, like the N-word, for example, a very poisonous word. But if you could take poison and create an antidote. You can create a vaccine. You could use it, but it just depends on how you go about it. You know what I'm saying? So you don't like it. So it's a book called Classic Illustrated did a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, and then that book is not championed by a lot of black collectors. Some people don't like it because they don't like the story of Uncle Tom. or the association of. Unfortunately, most people don't know who Uncle Tom really was.
Exactly.
Now this is a story about Harriet Beecher Stowe, I want to say, and so but those kind of questions and issues come up in our community. Should we collect this? Should just not
Right.
have anything? I mean, there are people that won't touch Black Panther because it gives them jungle trope vibe.
True.
Again, it's one of those things where you can't please everybody, and at the same time, people don't see the value in everything. I am a history buff, and so I see the value in history because those who don't remember their history are condemned to repeat it. So,
right,
that's how I see it in a nutshell.
It's like that brings up this next topic, and I hope I don't trigger you. I wanted to talk about, and we're not going to talk about anything specific, but I do want to talk about comic book critiquing or critiquing comic books, because one of the things I enjoy about the group is that it feels like a safe place in where if I don't like a book, even if it's written or created by Black creators, or like for instance, it's like I don't know if I don't typically like how a particular creator is doing business or something like that, I can have an honest opinion about that. You know what I mean? And not feel like I am being a hater or discriminating against somebody or anything like that. Like the whole self-hate debate and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, if this book is not working in a particular way, or if they could do something better, I like the fact that I can at least say something to that effect in this group. And I wanted you to speak on like just an idea.
Absolutely.
How do you handle just critique in general? It's like, how should we handle, critique or reviews of comics in the future of our work? Like, how do you navigate that?
I think that, one of the things that you have to do is, if you're going to critique a book, critique the book. Don't necessarily critique the artist. I think sometimes what happens is an artist can do a certain work and it's not viewed positively, or they can do something else. You know what I'm saying? It was, unfortunately, it's to like, okay, if I don't like something, then I don't like who did it. I don't like them. And that's not the way to go. I think that, ultimately, what we have to do is we have to demand excellence from our creators. We have to demand that they give us a product that is worth me spending or you spending earn money for. I made a statement in our last live. I think me and Paul were talking. I was like, we don't give out participation awards. I'm glad you're not gonna get an award for that. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of my challenges to Black independent creators is to create original content. Give me your version of Nighthawk. I need you to create your own superhero. I need you to go inside of your mind. I need you to draw something out of your heart that will or tell a story from your perspective. If I want Nighthawk, I'll go buy Marvel's Nighthawk. I won't buy your book. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I don't look at it as being, critical in that regard. I see myself as an advocate, because I know that if you're going to be around or whatever, only original content, the cream rises to the top. So when it comes to critical of artists or whatever, my thing is, not to take it personal and to not be, vicious in my analysis. However, if something I feel like could be better, I'm going to say it could be better. But I'm not going to just
Right.
say that. I'm also going to give you what I think is the reason why this is what you could do. Good often is giving a reader what they want, but just not how they want it. You want to keep the reader on his toes. You want to be able to engage your audience. You want people to sympathize even with your villains. If you're writing a superhero content or whatever, you want people to you want to make the villain the monster. He's a monster. I get it, but still in that portrayal, your job as a writer is to show the reader his perspective. He may be wrong as two left shoes, but your writing needs to reflect that, this is who he is. And this is why he is or why she is the way they are. And so when it comes to, critical, sometimes I think a lot of artists, they rely too heavily on art, and they could do a dope presentation in terms of what the art looks like, but their story falls flat because they don't take the time to craft story in a way to where you and I can like be enthused. A couple of pages grab people, if you don't, a person within a few pages of them turning their comic book, they're going to lose interest automatically. So and so we try to be respectful because we do have creators in our space, but at the same time we critique these books, and I think they appreciate them only for when we like them and when we think they can do better. I know I have had conversations with creators and they've asked for just advice, what I'm saying, because I'm a guy first as far as comics, story's got to be, I'll take subpar art, but I need story to be dope. And so I've had people come to me and just ask my advice, and I try to be as as transparent as I can or whatever. Try not to put favorites or whatever. But it's a balance thing. What I'm saying, because you don't want to be overly critical. There's an art we've been going kind of back and forth with, and I'm on record as saying that I really like her, but I want her to do better, and I sincerely mean that, because I think that if she doesn't getting more and better content, because you don't want to be that guy gets Marvel's 8th or 9th book on the list. You know what I'm saying? The way you get to Batman, or the way you get to Spider-Man, is that you have to do good content on these books that people may not even get a second look at. Right. You have to start. It's like we want to support our Black creators, but at the same time, I can't let them off the hook. I want them to give us dope content, because at the end of the day, people, not just Black people enjoy this hobby, and I want some of them to get into those offices like a Christopher Priest, or have the track record of a Dwayne Duffy. You know what I'm saying? Right. Because the thing is, you have to set the bar high, because if you don't set it high, they won't try to reach it, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes all the sense in the world. And I think that's another big part of this, is that since so many of us are afraid to critique books, they're not getting the type of discussion that needs to be had around their books. So it's sort of like, since everybody's afraid to speak their mind about the books, they're not saying anything at all. So what happens is those books, they might have a ton of positive reviews, or lukewarm reviews, but then it gets falls off on the wayside, because no one's willing to have a real critical analysis of that book or that story, and to help them carry it on. It's like
you have to be objective, for sure.
True.
Yeah, you have to be objective, for sure. 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 You have to be objective, for s
like I've personally been really
Go ahead and
critical
say what
of.
you are gonna say.
I've been really critical of Milestone a lot of times, and sometimes I'm afraid that my critique of
Mhm.
Milestone is is basically it's gonna. I'm probably keeping myself from being able to get an interview with any of those cats, but that might be part of the course. If it's like, but I think those conversations are important because the
Yeah,
vast majority of
yeah,
my collection is Milestone. You know what I mean? Because it's
yeah,
not like
yeah.
I'm not making an investment.
Right,
I'm buying the books, so I'm like I'm a part of this.
yeah,
But yeah, sometimes.
right.
But as far as me getting invited to that cookout, I'm probably not going to be. But not
Well,
too time
I,
soon.
you know what? I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'll probably be right there with you.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
won't
yeah, yeah.
probably get
It's
that
like
invitation either. I know that.
yeah.
I know that when it comes to Milestone, um, you know, I'm like you. I'm an old head from back in the day, and
Mhm,
so I remember the magic that these guys created. How organic it was, how fresh
mhm,
it was, how different it was. People talked a lot of trash about their art, but I just give them props for their own having their own style. They
mhm,
came in a certain way, and people out the gate they had to be doing.
mhm.
So we get this new iteration of these characters, and you know, I know for me, I've said it. I'm not just feeling it. I don't know. They got a guy that they got a book out there called Static, and the guy's
Mhm.
named Virgil Hawkins, but I really don't know who that dude is. You know, they call
It's
him Virgil.
you know what it
You
is
know,
because
I mean, I'm just saying.
it's one of them things, and this is where like this critical analysis of this book come from, right? It's like when okay, the strategy that they had when they introduced Static originally in the 90s. You know what I mean? This was supposed to be
Right,
Milestone's Spider-Man. So it's like they had a
right,
template, you know, for the character and how the character should work. And I'm not saying that they have to stick to that. No one's saying like you just have to be a certain way, but at least acknowledge where you're coming from and what made the character work. You know,
right.
and that might be why
Exactly.
there might be some hiccups in the storyline here and there because, and at the same time, I can admit that obviously they're trying to reach a whole new audience with this book. And this might be just the fact that I've aged out of this book. I don't know. They tried, maybe that's it's like it is with a lot of
Uh,
music. It's not for me. So I don't know. This might be
yeah,
one of those books,
yeah.
uh but at the same time I have to give them credit in the sense that it seems like they're listening and they're trying and they seem like they're
Mm,
pivoting pretty fast on certain things. So I have to give them credit for that too. Now something
absolutely. I do think that when it comes to them, I think they realize that. Go ahead.
no, keep going.
I'm sorry.
No, keep going.
I was, no. I was saying that it comes to yeah. When it comes to them, I think that um, they recognize that Milestone has a following. I think that that's the other thing too. It's like you have to, even if you want to go in these new directions or whatever, you got to feed the. You know what I'm saying? People don't even realize that Milestone sold over 10 million comic books in their heyday, and so it's like you got a fan base that's been hungering for this book for 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to do it right. And while I know they want to bring in different readers and that kind of thing, I get it. I really do. Um, but you got to know that you're going to get some heat when you do that. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? I was one
Mm-hmm.
of those guys. I was unapologetic. Who is this dude? I'm like he got grip. He got you know. What did they do with Virgil? I don't know who this dude is. So I mean, look, see that's the other thing too. I'm gonna tell you, I I'm take us off the conversation, but in regards to this,
No.
missed the Miles Morales boat. I missed the Miles Morales boat because of this. Because when I see Miles, I see static.
Yes.
And all I said, I told everybody, I said, that ain't nothing but static. That's static. That's Miles, who? So, when Ultimate Fallout 4 came out, I was like, whatever. Y'all go ahead.
Wow.
I wish I had done more. But initially, I was, that's okay. You know what I'm saying? Because again, I was a Milestone fan. I was a static guy.
Yeah, yep.
Marvel, y'all jacking, DC on this. So, and Spider-Man is now his own character, and I respect the character. That's the square that I stood on when it came to him. I was like, we don't need this. We already had this. They need to reboot and keep the story of Static going. But that's how I felt,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, but it is what it is. We live, we learn, you know what I'm saying? And maybe I am to get off my lawn sometime, I can't help it.
No, I think it's important though. It's important to understand that point.
Yeah.
Is because it's the fact that,
Right.
my kids to this day might not even, they love Miles. They don't have any idea who Static is to a degree. My kids. It's like that's how it goes. But also it brings up another part of the conversation as far as being a Black comic book collector. As we're looking to support Black creators, Black characters, Black publishers, even. How do we define, in that sense, how did you define Black? Because at the same time, like for instance, for me, right, I was with you to a degree. I wasn't necessarily completely sold on Miles Morales, if for no other reason than the fact that it wasn't created by a Black person, right? And so, even though it was hot, it's a popular character, it was doing all these positive things. It's like I wasn't. I think it was important to me as a comic book fan that the people behind this character were Black at the time, and and I find it very interesting that now it's a formula, especially when it comes to Bendis. He has this thing where if he creates a Black character, that Black character becomes hot, and now it's sort of like it's almost like it's a given that Black collectors have to sort of like, okay, we got to invest in this character now. It's like every single one of the characters that Bendis has made, Naomi, Riri Williams, Miles Morales. It's like all of them, the value of their books, their first appearances, all very well into reaching $1,000 or more. And so how do we define Black in that sense in terms of the books and characters that we create in support?
Gotcha. Well, let me deal with Bendis first. Bendis, if you let him tell it, said that he created these characters because Bendis has, Black daughters. His stepdaughters, I guess, had no representation. So that was his reason for creating Naomi and Riri Williams. So in that regard, I can see, him doing that. Now, let's keep it 100 when it comes to the creation of Black characters. Marvel and DC level, they have had there are hundreds of Black characters between these two companies, and we might see 3 or 4% of those characters. But the question becomes, how do we decide what we support when it comes to these two? I'll get to original content in a second. But when it comes to these two, the big two, I think it all boils down to the intent. And the reason why I say the intent, as a story guy, regardless of what's presented to us, whether it's an Asgardian god or whether it's an alien or whether it's a roach, it's all based on the human experience. That's the first thing. So if a black character has a story that is directly connects him to a cultural thing, then I think that we can support that character. There's a character on DC named Jet, a Jamaican female. Now I think Jet is quote unquote dead now, but there are a few Caribbean characters, but not many. But she comes to mind as one, and so ethnically, with her being Jamaican, she deserves to get a look, if nothing else, than that somebody that a Jamaican kid or her being whatever is looking for representation can look to that character. So I'm ultimately, if you can identify with the character in some shape or form, then I think it's okay. When it comes to black collectors who we should support, a few black books out here that are I think Excellence is a dope title. I think Philadelphia is a dope title. But there are others. I'm not gonna say why I think it's not so. They have content that I can quote unquote identify with. You know what I'm saying? If they interject things like race into their story or the conversation, then naturally I can identify that as a black man or whatever. And that's fine. I think that we're not a monolithic as well. A character like, say, Icon, whose original iteration was a conservative, but most black people, this is going to be unpopular, but most black people are conservative. They ain't going to tell you that, but they have conservative values. You know what I'm saying? The Democrats just got a better PR machine. But by and large, a lot of black people are very conservative, and so a character like that you cannot discount or miss, even though as a Republican he may be considered a Oreo or Uncle Tom or whatever. And I've challenged people to go out and go back and read that original Icon run, because there's nothing about that run that speaks to him as Uncle Tom. Anybody that wants you to get side and go handle your business, and that's called accountability. So, it's also how we see things and how we perceive things, in terms of, our perspective, you know what I'm saying? So, but, and that was the funny thing, because a lot of people understand what Dwayne McDuffie was getting at with that character. Another character that is not original character, I'll give you one, Deathlock. Now, Deathlock, the original Deathlock is a white guy. Right. But the Deathlock run that Dwayne McDuffie did was a man that was in a killing machine, but he was a pacifist. And so it's like, how does that dynamic work? It's like, well, it works every day in most of the lives of a lot of black people. You can't go out here and act a fool and hit somebody upside the head because you feel like it. You have to exercise constraint in those kind of things. Those are things that that we all can identify with. Again, it's one of those things where can you identify with the character? A lot of times it's not about them being quote unquote black. We've had this discussion in our group about Icon. Saying, well, some people say Icon is not black because he's an alien. Right. So, but my pushback to that is that he lived a black experience. Yeah. I don't know too many Rachel Dolezals out here.
When you think about it, think about this. If what's interesting about the Superman character is that since he's an alien, he's really not. He's not even a human being. But at the same time, he represents the human ideal, or more importantly, the American idea, right? So, in a nutshell, figuratively, Superman is an idea of them, is an American idea, and to that,
Right.
so in that regard, so is Icon. Icon, which is aptly named, of course,
Yes.
he's representing the idea of blackness, not necessarily more so than actually being physiologically black, I guess, for lack of a better.
Right. Right.
So it's like, as long as he's sort of like sticks to the idea of it, I think he, in a, frankly, he's passing, of course, but yeah, he's sort of, he's sort of, he's
That's another conversation.
Right? It's like, but he's basically passing as a black man, but as long as he sticks to the idea of blackness, I think it's enough that there to for us to support.
Yeah, man. It's a you know, it's a thin line, and you know, depending on what side of the line you're on, may depend on the you know, the situation. You know, I just think that we make too much of a person. I'll put it like this: there may be a character that may be very, very fair skinned. Let's say, for example, you know, there's an argument now whether or not Black Adam is actually black. Okay. You know, now me personally, I'm not the biggest Black Adam fan, so I really don't care. You know, I funny that where does the black come from? He's called Black Adam. So I don't know if the black has anything to do with his heart or his racial makeup or whatever, or where he quote unquote geographically lives or whatever. And see, it's things like that, you know, bog us down. Because we were talking about Hawkman. And so, you know, Carter Hall is a European, but he's reincarnation of a pharaoh. So does that make him black? You know, in the comics, he's presented as a white man. You know, either way, you know what I'm saying? It's a small deal. My question is, what is he as a human being? You know, because we have black characters that have, you know, black hearts. And so my question is, you know, Killmonger on paper might look like a great idea, but Killmonger, an actual physical human being, pretty problematic.
So
you know what I'm saying? So even when we look at blackness or whatever, you know what I'm saying, it's like, what do we identify with? Some people don't even realize that, like, for Christopher Priest, when he created Black Panther #1, the first issue of the Dora Milaje, right? People don't realize that, you know, well, some people do know that was actually a nod to a actual people called the Dahomey Tribe, where they had female warriors. But what you won't read about them is that same female warriors, you know, kidnap slaves. But you won't get that part of the story. So, you know, so there's a book called Barracoon that Zora Hill Hurston did, and it basically is an account of the last slave. And so he details the Dahomey tribe, and so that's where that comes from. So while we embracing this, let us know, be sure what you're embracing. You know, it's okay to kind of geek out with it on a fandom side, but on a real historical side, may not be necessarily what you want to identify with. So but it is what it is.
Yes, sir. And we're right up on our time here. How can they, if you happen to be interested in Black Comic Lords, can they find you on Facebook? That's pretty much straightforward. Find you.
Well,
Black
you
Comic
just go
Lords.
to. Well, you can find us on Facebook, Black Comic Lords, as it is spelled. You can also catch on Instagram, Black Comic Lords, and Twitter, Black Comic Lords. As for me, you can reach out to me at Richard Richard Wright 507 on Instagram, and I post certain things, from time to time, but primarily Black Comic Lords on Facebook is where you'll find our groups. We have two groups there, Black Comic Lords, and we have a group called Black Superheroes Forever, which is where we allow the fandom and more blurred talk to go on, and that's where you.
Got you. All right, man. Thank you for your time. For my man Richard Wright, Kyle in the background there. I'm Imani Lateef. You can find me at Black Comics Universe and blackcomicsuniverse.com. Thank you and good night.